Welcome back to another Lab tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about how to build your own custom harmonic splitters or pitch splitters or whatever you might call them in your particular circle of friends. When it comes to music production and audio production, there tends to be a lot of different names and labels for things as we develop them. And maybe, perhaps, over time, we all agree on one name for this. But until that day, we all kind of use our own nomenclature, if you will. All right, so this is all kind of based out of the idea of detuning. If you're familiar with sound design and synthesis, detuning the oscillators in a synth will oftentimes lead to a much wider and even deeper sound. It introduces a form of modulation naturally called phasing, okay? And that's what happens when a couple of voices are just slightly out of tune with one another, okay? And we're not talking octaves here, we're just talking cents. We're not even talking full steps. You can hear the same exact effect in a choir or a large vocal ensemble. Not everyone has the same exact frequency that they're singing at, so you could view this as being detuned, a large group of people and each individual voice being detuned from one another, and that is how you get a sound that is larger than the sum of its parts. Okay, even in simple synthesis where you have, say, 3 oscillators at play and they're all slightly detuned from one another, well, the sound is bigger because of that well, I'd say the math, but it's more about how our ears are interpreting things, and it has to do with how the sound wave is affected through harmonics. But we're not going to go into all that. What we're going to do is show you the basic architecture for this, the basic setup. Now, there are several different ways you can go about doing this, and we'll probably try to hammer home the idea that this is not the only one way, okay? This is not the one true way. There are many different ways, and nobody should be out there poo-pooing on anyone else's ideas. This is one of those types of processing where the number one rule of music production comes into play. And the number one rule in music production is use your ears first, okay? If it sounds good and you're achieving the goal that you set out to achieve, then it must be good. It must be okay. And just trust in that. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into this. And again, we're going to set this up in such a way that you can actually use the same basic setup for multiple sounds in the same project, if you will, which is why we're going to show you this particular setup, okay? Now, for this lesson, we've actually grabbed a few different types of sounds just to kind of show off the flexibility of this. We talked initially about how in the world of synthesis, you detune your various oscillators in a sound or detune the voices, and it leads to a wider instrument or a wider overall sound. So we're going to show you some vocals, some piano, some guitar, just to kind of shake things up a bit, show you how versatile and flexible this actually is. First example comes from user ABC Open over at freesound.org. This is a toddler singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I believe. All right, there's a small snippet of that one. Here's Bailey from the Logic Pro stock library of sounds. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And our toddler friend singing the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star should be up to her speed in no time. A Bosendorfer grand piano. And a Rule acoustic strum loop. All right, all 3 of these sounds come from the Logic Pro stock library of sounds. We will start with our toddler, and as you can see down here in our mixer, there are no shenanigans in play. We don't have any kind of effects or plugins loaded up. So without further ado, here we go. First thing we're going to want to do, and since we're going to do this to all of our sounds, we might as well just select all of the tracks in our mixer here, and we're going to send this out to 2 different buses. Okay, and we might as well just start by sending these all at full strength. That means 100% of the original audio signal is going to be outputted to these. Now, the other thing we're going to want to do is sum these, and we'll just take from stereo to bus. Okay, which means that now both auxiliary 1 and 2 are outputted to auxiliary 3. Now again, there are other ways to set this up. Just bear with us and see what this one does for us. Now on the auxiliary 1 and 2 channels, what we're going to do is load up a pitch shifter. And the reason why we are using this tool is because it is a fairly universal tool these days in all modern DAWs. And that means that all of you have access to the same basic tool. Okay. Now in Logic, we do have to disclose some more advanced parameters by clicking on this little disclosure triangle here. Simple enough. And by default, they have semitones turned up here, and what we're going to do is set these to 0. Okay, and just slide the slider. You can even double click on there and hit 0 and enter. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to detune this a bit on one side and then detune it a bit by about the same amount on the other side. So it's going to be a little flat here, a little bit sharp here. Okay, and then we're going to also delay the signal a bit. And it doesn't have to have that much separation. But we do want a little bit more delay than what we would use in, say, a sample delay. Okay, so we're actually talking whole milliseconds here. And we can mess with our stereo field next. Now, a lot of people will just tell you, okay, hard left and hard right pan these. I prefer personally to keep them up in the stereo field just a little bit. And just to talk about that for a brief moment, one of the big leaps forward in audio processing trends as of late has been mid-side processing, especially in masters, okay? Moving away from a traditional master into a mid-side master, okay? And it allows us to get a louder, cleaner, crisper mix with more separation from the sound, or within the sounds. And it also allows us to get a little bit more out of the stereo field in general, okay? Now, when we detune things, obviously it's going to make a sound a bit wider, but what we can do is force this further into the stereo field, which then we can reap those rewards later on during the mastering phase. If you have questions about that, you can search our YouTube channel for mid-side or mastering or mixing or any of the above. So now that we've had this sent out further to the left and further to the right in our stereo field, we're going to close these out. And on this summed channel here, auxiliary 3, in fact, we can just change the names of these right quick. All right, so on this sum, we will just put a simple reverb. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, and we definitely do not want it to be changing the sound too much. Let's just go for a simple recording room and just make sure that we don't have a bunch of lows inundating our sound there. And we'll just leave that as it is. So it's a basic preset, basically. And now with our track soloed here, we're going to go ahead and listen to this. Okay, so it's a little hot right now, so we'll bring these two down. Again, we don't want the pitch shifted part of this audio to be dominant. We want it to be supportive. So obviously it's going to come in under, decibel-wise, the original. Okay, one of the things that we want to be aware of here is how much reverb is actually being introduced here. Part of that delay sound is going to be the actual reverb that's in play. And part of it is going to be from the sample delay. Okay, bringing down that reverb, brought that back under control. Now, we've heard this a couple of times. Let's just go ahead and do an A-B comparison. We'll listen to this processed one more time. While that's fresh in your mind, we'll turn these off. Listen to it again. It's adorable. Let's hear it again. Okay, so there's definitely some added width, some added depth. maybe just a touch too much reverb in there, but we'll go ahead and we'll move along. It could most definitely be a byproduct of the environment that sound was captured in. So let's go ahead and move on to these. Let me just turn these off so we can get a fair representation of our track here. All right, so here's Bailey singing for us.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to toggle on the bus for these.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, we can back off some of this. Hear it again.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now let's listen to that clean again.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And processed.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, now this one, being a more modern ditty than Twinkle Twinkle, maybe we add just a little bit more of this effect and see what it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, see now right there, that's almost a perfect amount of everything at play. It could probably use a type of reverb that's a little more suited to that style of music, that soulful sound, and maybe a touch of some delay modulation, for instance, to add just a touch more movement over time. But that right there is a pretty current sound. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll toggle these off again, and let's move on to our piano and see what that sounds like. Go ahead and solo that. All right, let's go ahead and turn on these buses. And let's toggle those off. So it quickly starts to feel a little bit flat. Now, obviously there's a much larger octave range at play here with the piano. So what we could do, just for experimentation's sake, is we could say drop the semitones by one whole semitone, and that's going to add a layer of one octave lower. Let's listen to that. And if we were to turn that off and hear it again. Okay, so there's plenty of things that you can do with this. Again, we're just showing you the most basics, or most basic of all of these. Oh, we should talk about the mix really quick. If we go back, just one sound. Sorry for the confusing workflow here. I just want to touch on this mix slider here. We can actually move this up a bit for something like modern vocals and exploit this effect just a bit more.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then when you go back and you listen to it without this, after hearing it at a greater mix for a while,
Oh, yeah.
you can begin to hear just how flat and one-dimensional the original capture actually was. Okay, it's a great quality capture, don't get me wrong, but just for the example of this lesson, it's pretty flat. So rural acoustic, let's do that next. Gonna move this down to 25 again, give or take. And now we'll listen to that processed. All right, so you saw me dial this down to about -4.5 decibels on both sends here. Let's listen to it in its dry state. And again in the process state. Okay, so you can hear that detuning at play. Now, with something like a guitar, where maybe you don't want as much actual detuning happening, what we can do is bring down the sense just a little bit and hear it again. That might be a little bit closer to suitable. Bring this down just one more cent, and then we can turn up our mix just a bit. See what that sounds like. Let's listen to the original again. All right, so that's pretty darn close to a good mix for a modern production. But where this effect really starts to shine for us is in the vocal processing.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. Now, again, you can set up your own harmonic splitting or pitch splitting or whatever you want to call it in your own way. We highly encourage people to be spending a lot of time experimenting with their own workflows and their own techniques. But this is a great way to get started. Again, we're talking just a couple of buses here. You take your original sound, you bus it out to 2 different buses, okay, and then you pan those left and right. It's up to you if you want to do a hard left and a hard right pan. I tend to go just a little shy of a full pan. And then on each one of those channels, you set up a pitch shifter. And again, you want these, you want the pitch shift to be in opposition to each other between these two. So one is going to be, say, like a -5 to 10 to 12, somewhere in there. And the other is going to be a positive. And then you're going to want the delays to be offset just a little bit. If you want a little bit less of that phasing, maybe what you do is you bring down that delay just a little bit.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. And then that's it. You know, the other thing that we've added in this scenario here is we've set the output of the 2 auxiliary channels with the pitch shifters to another bus. Okay, and now on that auxiliary track, the one that these 2 have been bussed out to, we've just put a very simple reverb on there. If we turn it off, you can tell it's actually a very subtle effect.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And with it.
yeah. Oh.
Okay, so it helps to thicken it just slightly, but it's by no means really shaking things up. So that's it. 3 auxiliary channels later, and you basically have a setup that you can run multiple elements out of. Of course, you may want to have different settings for the different instruments. That may not work every time, but let's say you have a bunch of vocals that you want to process in a similar manner. Go ahead and shoot for this. See if it works. Chances are it will. Hope that helped to clear some stuff up for you, folks. I know we do get quite a few questions about this type of processing in general. And you can also experiment with applying the stuff inline, but working with it in a parallel fashion is a lot better. 9 times out of 10, it leaves the original audio track crystal clear. You really don't bruise the integrity of the sound in any way. And then it gives you the ability to add back or take away the effect at will without affecting the original sound, which is optimal in most cases. So yeah, we hope that this was educational and entertaining. Thanks for swinging by, folks. Always appreciate it. Don't forget to leave us some feedback below. Let us know if you have a request for future tutorials. That is how we pick our next tutorial. So give a shout out if you want to get heard. Thanks for stopping by, folks. See you again soon. Cheers.